Hi there, welcome to today's painting tutorial. Today we are going to paint a green parrot with acrylic paints on a canvas. This is an 8x8 canvas. Grab the sketch in the description below if you would like to paint along. So I'm starting off with the eye. I took a 2/0 round brush, put a small amount of black into that eye, and then I took some of this brown paint and then went around that edge. And I'm working on pre-mixing the colors for this one. I notice when I pre-mix my colors, I can get a little bit more depth of color because I have some more values and just paints that are ready to go. It's a personal preference if you want to pre-mix your colors or just mix them as you go. I think it's good to experiment with both and see which technique you like better. But I do think if you take the time to pre-mix your colors, your painting can look more realistic, have more depth, and more dimension. So I'm continuing with the face here. I also added an acrylic retarder medium into the paint, as well as some titanium white into some of the paint. And I'm doing that because I wanted to have some options for a really opaque paint. I'm trying to get rid of some of the streakiness that acrylic paint can have, so I'm experimenting with that. So to paint the beak, I started with the darker values first and then gradually got lighter. I'm working on a white canvas that can also make some of the colors appear a bit brighter because it has that white background. And then I'm taking some of the darker green and going around the eye. And the paint is coming out pretty opaque, so it is getting good coverage. But I did have some trouble with the colors being a bit muddy. So if that happens, you just want to clean your brushes really well. And you can also use two brushes. So use one for your darker colors and then another brush for the lighter colors. And that can help reduce some of that muddiness. For the feathers, I'm putting a darker gray color for that first base layer. And then I'm grabbing a chisel brush and putting some of the light green on top, just feathering it in there in between those spaces. And this chisel brush is really good for creating feathers because it has a nice shape. And then I continue with that brush. I start putting in the dark values of this right wing, also putting in some blue there so that we have a variety of color. Also, that blue is going to help create the appearance of the shadow. It's almost a blue-green color, so almost like a dark teal, and that creates a great shadow for some of these brighter, more vibrant greens. And then I'm just using that edge of the brush to create these little lines that really create nice feathers very easily, putting in some of that hooker's green to create that nice bright boulder green. And then I took the chisel brush, continued to start building some of these feathers in the chest area, starting with the darker color and then picking up that lighter color and then putting that in. I put some of the teal on that right side, so that creates more of a shadow. The teal has some blue in it, so it's going to create a nice cool tone that makes an excellent shadow. Then I'm continuing to put in these darker colors, just using the brush in the direction of form, continuing to build, trying to go from dark to light, putting the light feathers on top. And again, they're going to show up nicely on that white background, but you do have to be careful about transparency, and you may have to do a few layers in order to combat that. And then I added the tail feathers underneath the branch. So this is a good first layer. For the bird, I took a size 1 dome brush, a bit of this dark gray paint, and put in the toes for the feet. We're going to try to work in layers with that, and starting with a dark layer is going to be perfect for adding details later. I'm taking that 1 dome brush and just putting a few little highlights with that lighter green. You probably want to wait for the base layer to dry before you do that. This one had a bit of yellow in it, so it showed up nicely. However, it is going to dry, and when the acrylic paint dries, it gets a bit darker. So you may have to do that a few times to get a light enough value. Then I'm taking this small blender brush, putting in some dark values for the log, and then putting in some lighter brown. This can be really loose and painterly. The branch is not our focal point, so you don't need to add too much attention in detail here. You want it to look really nice and loose and painterly. Now I'm looking at the first layer. I need to go back and refine, work on my values. I'm also refining the eye a bit with that 2/0 round brush, continuing to make these circles around the eye, almost like an outline, just to give it a bit more dimension, help it stand out and get more contrast as well. So I'm going back and almost using this Hooker's green paint as a glaze and trying to push that color a little bit brighter and more vibrant, just because the bird is looking a bit dull. So I'm having to go back and adjust my saturation, trying to push that saturation in color so that things are not looking too gray. And to counteract that, you do want to let your first layer dry completely, and then you should be able to put some brighter, lighter colors on top. You might need to mix those with a titanium white so that they show up on top of those darker layers. And then I took a size 6 filbert brush, and this brush is really great for creating feathers. If you just use the tip of that brush and just pull it down, you can see how I'm able to create these small little streaks that are amazing for creating feathers with acrylic paint on birds. Make sure you're using a lighter value that has some titanium white in it so that it will show up. I tend to paint very quickly and I tend to be impatient, but this is a section where you should really take your time and paint each individual little marks and feathers, and that's what can really give you some amazing realism when you're painting with acrylics. It would also be a good idea to paint this in sections, create your base layer, put it aside, go have lunch, take a break, and then come back to it for your details. Then I took that 2/0 round brush, some lighter paint, some white and some gray, and just started putting in these little textures for the feet, and putting that light value on top of the dark is really going to make it come forward and show up as a nice detail without using a lot of work or effort. Then I'm coming back with some more glazing using a small blender brush. Also putting in some of these darker values, darkening the values, creating more contrast, creating more saturation. Then I go in with that chisel brush and start putting in some more feathers with the teal color that's showing up nicely on top of the darker color and creating a nice realistic look. And then I went back with some of the lighter green and put some of that on top just so it blended in a little bit better with the piece. Then I go back and continue to refine the eye, take a bit of the white paint, and then just put that little highlight in there to make the parrot come alive. I'm putting some of this white paint around the eye, on the upper lid and the lower lid, just continuing to refine it so that we get a more realistic look. Then I go back and continue to do some blending and some refining with that nice blender brush. Then I wanted to paint in a really minimalist background, so I took the fan brush, I took some white paint and some of this light blue color and just really quickly put in that layer of paint. If I wanted this to be a professional looking piece, I would probably do a few layers rather than one, but this is just a study, so I wanted to do one layer nice and quickly. And then I took that 2/0 round brush and then popped in a small little highlight with that white paint. Then I go back and add another layer along the beak with some of the burnt sienna and some orange. And then I want to try to put a nice highlight in there with that white paint. And then I took that 2/0 and then just went over the feet again, adding some more texture just to create a little bit more realism. Okay, and we will call this painting complete. Thank you so much for painting along with me. Like and subscribe if you want to see more painting tutorials. If you want to improve your painting skills quickly, grab my free guide in the description below. I also have a full painting course if you're interested, so check that out as well, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!